All right, all this month, WSAV has been unmasking domestic violence. This Wellness Wednesday, we continue our series of conversations on the issue. This week, we're focusing on the impact of domestic violence on children. So Mary Jo Horton is back to walk us through this. Mary Jo, the effect of domestic violence on children. So first of all, we're talking about a sense of safety in children,
right,
and then the effect that that sense of safety or lack thereof has on children.
And that's one of our core developmental principles, is that we feel safe in our environment, which then allows us to develop naturally on all the other steps. So when we don't have a core sense of safety, it makes everything else we want to learn to do as a person, as a human, very difficult.
So as a child, what do we look for in a child? How will this come out?
So it's going to come out in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
You might see a lot of acting out and aggressive behavior. You might see a lot of avoidance behavior. You might have a lot of physical symptoms that's affecting the body, a lot of complaints about their stomach or their head. When we really look at behavior in children, we have to really be detectives to see what is underneath that behavior.
Okay, and you know, we've talked before about children and trauma and what we're seeing playing out in our streets, the violence in our streets. I imagine this is along that same vein.
Right,
correct?
and because it's actually a trauma that is occurring over a period of time, so the body has no ability to kind of get out of that moment, so it's chronic trauma.
And it also impacts the way children learn to connect with each other and other people.
So if you think about how do you learn how to be a person who's going to interact with other people, it's by the adults around you. So when you don't see healthy connections, healthy communication, people getting their needs met, how would you know how to do that?
You wouldn't, and you wouldn't know how to navigate conflict.
No, conflict should be healthy in healthy relationships. It should bring us closer together.
The impact, you said in your notes, it changes over time. So as the child gets older, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So, you know, you might see a child that is more aggressive and acting out younger, and then they might be terrified of themselves, and so they end up isolating, and then they don't want anything to do with anybody.
Terrified of themselves.
Yes, I see this so often in therapy where people will say, I'm not allowed to be angry because when I've been angry, I've acted in a way that scared me. And so now they just avoid conflict and avoid connection at all costs.
Because they don't trust themselves
They don't
to
trust
handle
themselves
it well.
to be safe.
To be safe. Okay. That's terrible for a child. Okay, for anyone, but
Yes.
especially for a child.
100%.
All right, so let's talk about interventions and strategies
Yes.
when we're dealing with young people. So you say here, learning what their behavior is, trying to communicate, what the behavior is trying to communicate.
So you really want to remember, all behavior is communication. And so rather than just focus on you're doing something wrong, I'm going to give you a consequence. That's needed. We want to hold people accountable. But I also want to ask myself, like, this behavior seems out of context. What is it really telling me?
And how do you do this next one? Create routines and a sense of calm in other areas.
So
of their life.
let's think about it. We may not be in control of their home life, but we have impact on how we are around that child. So if they're in our presence, we want to be calm. We want to be predictable folks. We want to always have a sense of when the child is around us, they know that this is a safe person.
Okay, let's talk about that for just a little bit, because what we're talking about is those of us, we're not the children's parents.
Correct.
We are the adults they get to interact with. Right?
Maybe we know them at church. Maybe they come over and play at our house. Maybe we know them through other social situations. So what we think about is all the ways in which we influence the children that are near us, and can we be safe anchors for those kids so they're at least seeing some healthy things, even if it's not at home.
Right, you're always an example.
Always.
When you're in front of kids, you are. Okay. The other one, so teach emotional regulation skills and how to calm themselves.
This is a big thing for caregivers.
Yeah.
How are we teaching kids to regulate their emotions? When they're upset or they're disappointed or they're having a meltdown, how are we teaching them to self-soothe? How are we teaching them to get back to neutral? And a lot of that is, how are you doing that?
In your own life.
In your own life, because kids, again, they're observant. They're little sponges. They're trying to figure it out. If they see their caregivers always having these meltdowns or yelling or not getting their needs met or punishing themselves or isolating, they're not learning how to do it for themselves, and then we're leaving them without that skill.
So in order to teach it, you also have to show the example of it in your own life.
Modeling is powerful.
Modeling
and
is
again,
powerful.
like you mentioned, it's not just the parents. We all have a duty to model appropriate behavior for the children near us.
And before we get to this last point, we had a discussion about violence and trauma
Yes.
like a couple years ago, and you said we're seeing a lot of young people who can't regulate their own emotions.
They can't. They are so dysregulated and they're out of joint over anything, and it really makes it difficult for them to function.
All right, and then the last point, you had therapy resources or increase different types of therapy resources.
So I always like to think that we want more options because not every type of therapy works for every type of person.
Yeah.
So let's think about what that looks like. That means play therapy, interactive support groups. That could mean, group therapy settings. We want to increase all the ways and we think that we can help somebody learn how to retrain their brain so that they can engage in healthy connections.
And keep doing that as they get older. Okay, Mary Jo, thank you so much. And you'll be back. We have a panel discussion tomorrow at 4:30, and you'll be back for that. Thank you, Mary Jo. All right, Tina.